Quick, are you a meerkat? A chimp? A snow leopard? A wolf? No, I'm not high. I'm talking about the 4 belonging personas developed by Don Berger, today's guest on the DesuckifyWork podcast. This may be the most important work anyone is doing right now. We are in the middle of a belonging crisis, fueled by social media, egged on by COVID, and reinforced by our own lack of clarity on how to make things better. Enter Don. Don's whole life has been centered around belonging. It hasn't always been easy, but his work has paid off for him and now for all of us. His quest began in the womb, a mother preparing to give him up for adoption, a son feeling that disconnect viscerally. As an adopted child, he always wondered if he belonged. As a 9-year-old Israeli moving over 5,000 miles to the US, those feelings only intensified. As an adult navigating the business world and ultimately selling the startup he founded, his quest became a calling. Where do we find belonging? How do we cultivate it? And why does it feel so elusive at times? Don has answers and some practical tools that can help us find our way. You can start by taking the Belonging Persona quiz on his website. I'm a snow leopard, by the way. Then you should read his book, The Quest, the definitive guide to finding belonging. Lastly, you should listen to this episode. Don goes deep on a bunch of practical ways to increase belonging, including creating a belonging mindset, fostering a belonging culture at work, which needs to come from top leadership, not HR, and one I don't fully agree with, but can appreciate, taking a more transactional view of work. That last one would be misery for me, but nirvana for others. I think the key is asking yourself the question I pose to every guest. What role does work play in your life? There is no wrong answer. You get to decide. And I can help you figure it out, by the way. If you enjoy this episode, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Don. Don Berger, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Thank you for having me. I just love the name. I couldn't resist being with you.
I appreciate that. Well, I think you're going to give us a lot of good stuff to help desuckify the world of work and beyond. So with that, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background? Who are you and what do you do and how'd you come to be doing it?
Sure. So my name is spelled and pronounced Don, which is the first kind of look into my life. I was born in Israel. That's the reason it's pronounced Don. And I moved to the United States when I was 9, didn't speak a word of English, went to public schools my whole life, ended up at Georgetown University during the Great Recession. So I took any job I can get once I graduated. I took a job in management consulting of all things because I really wanted to, it was government management consulting. And because I really wanted to apply my MBA skills to fix government, to desuckify government, if you will.
Yeah.
And I then got there and I was like, well, I can't do this. This is impossible. I guess only Elon Musk can do it. And even he can't do it.
Yeah.
He was like, I'm out of here.
Exactly.
So yeah, I kind of, I got to Booz Allen, was assigned to, I think, like FEMA or the Social Security Administration or to both. I didn't have a single clocked hour of work. I just saw the tremendous waste going on. So I decided to go full time on my side project after 4 months. And initially it was this seating chart for weddings called Social Tables.
Okay.
And I sold it in 2000. That was 2011. I sold it in 2018 for 5 times revenue. So we were doing 20 million. I sold it for 100 and stayed there for a year. So late in 2019, I got out and COVID happened. So I was stuck with a bunch of time, a bunch of resources, and my entire sense of self was gone. And I realized that what I was really missing was my sense of belonging, and I was getting it from work. And we'll touch on it, I'm sure, later on. But basically, all of the ways that I found belonging was through work, whether it was through friends, through self-esteem, and so on and so forth. And feeling belongingless has always been the theme of my life. I'm adopted, I'm an immigrant. So I always felt like I didn't belong, and it's something I always tried to solve for subconsciously. But now that my company was gone and the world shut down, I had time to process it consciously. And I
Mm,
just started exploring the topic. I designed a process to help people find it, and wrote a book on how anybody can strengthen their sense of belonging.
mm. I love the topic. I love the idea of belonging, and I think in many ways it feels like we're in crisis mode on that front in a lot of places. At work is one of them, but I think across work, personal life, the sort of social sphere, community sphere, maybe even the most. Um, you mentioned the idea of finding belonging at work, and so it makes me wonder if you've had some recalibration of like the role that work plays in your life. Have you thought about that?
100%. And it's through a few different lenses. The first lens is I think of work as pre-COVID and post-COVID, which I know
Mm-hmm.
is not like novel, but like
Yeah.
it is important to consider how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Before COVID, especially for younger people, there was this like hustle porn kind of like mentality where it was like you got to bleed, insert company color here,
Yeah.
or you got to go and get wasted with your colleagues, like the
Mm-hmm.
salarymen in Japan. You gotta like you gotta go to like you gotta go to company events or else you're ostracized.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I ran my company actually. And I
Yeah.
say that with some healthy guilt.
Yeah.
It was previously with shame. Because for example, if people didn't go to a happy hour, I kind of started to judge them,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
started alienating them.
Mm.
So that's the first lens, that's kind of like post-COVID realization that work is just work. Work is work,
Yeah.
and we're kind of moving, I think, towards more a transactional nature in work, where it's like 9 to 5
Mm.
boundaries. I
Yeah.
can do, it's secondary to my primary life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first angle. The second angle is I started having a family,
Yeah.
and I realized that hey, my average age of social table is 27. So I realized that other people have lives, people have their spirituality, their houses of worship, they have their hobbies. And just because I didn't at the time doesn't mean that they don't.
Yeah.
So, I think leaders kind of apply their worldview onto
Yeah.
their employees, which is okay to a certain extent. I mean, you got to hire the right people, but
Yeah.
it does become toxic. So, those are the two lenses that I think belonging at work needs to be reconsidered because to summarize, we no longer use work as our primary belonging factor,
Yeah.
and we have things happening outside of work that give us belonging.
Mm. So what do you say to somebody who says, "Well, I want people to come to my company and be all in and bought in and they feel like to create the kind of culture that they want, they need to have some of that, meaning the social sort of glue of let's do stuff together, let's go out together, let's go drinking, whatever the thing is, or the um, buy into the Kool-Aid sort of thing, like you got to drink it fully to be here. How do you create a culture that still gets people feeling good and excited about the work they're doing if you're not going sort of by that old playbook?
So first of all, I think we need to think about work as a platform for belonging and not as a source for belonging.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the problem with when it's a source of belonging, as soon as you leave the company, you're fired, you're laid off, you retire, you no longer have those you don't fill your what I call belonging fuel tank
Yeah.
from you just kind of lose a bunch of fuel. But if
Mm-hmm.
you use this as a platform, then you start finding relationships, probably, perhaps even your future romantic partner.
Mm-hmm.
Self-esteem is a way to belong, which includes recognition, like award program, something like that. You
Yeah.
know, um, there are many ways to find belonging that people can use. They use to find belonging through work as a platform, so that once you leave, you're no longer you still have those things, or at least you acknowledge you got them from your workplace, and maybe you have to get them from somewhere else.
Mm.
The other piece of it is I think that's important is that, you touched on drinking together. I
Yeah.
think drinking does not belong at work at all.
Okay.
I think that it has alcohol has no place at the workplace for several reasons. The first is that it ostracizes people who don't drink. The
Hmm.
second is that it creates an unsafe environment due to some people's bad habits.
Yeah.
Um, and the third is that it's a really kind of like easy peasy, like bonding experience that's really not thought out at all. It's
Mm.
like the basics.
Yeah.
So I don't encourage employers to have drinking. It's just a liability.
Yeah.
And specifically as it relates to, your specific question around how do employers still get the buy-in without the backbreaking?
Hmm.
And I think the answer is being honest about the backbreaking. Um, and that will save a lot of time and money
Yeah.
if they were upfront about it. And I
Mm.
think post-COVID, we can have those conversations.
Yeah. Mm.
It's like, hey, this is the kind of culture that's this. You got to be in the office.
Yeah.
No double backing it. Like,
Yeah.
so I think that's the answer is just
Yeah.
really identify, and because it's aligned to the organizational leader, right? The
Yeah.
organizational leader is there, 9 to 9, then that kind of sends a message.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, in some ways, you mentioned Elon a little bit earlier, but I think of the Tesla culture and maybe the SpaceX culture. I don't know, but I feel like Tesla gets it more. That culture
SpaceX for
sounds.
sure. Eric
Yeah.
Berger talks about it in his
Okay.
in his SpaceX
Yeah.
book, which
So
is amazing.
yeah. So like
Definitely.
what I feel there is as much as like I look at that culture and go, that sounds horrible to me. Like I don't want any part of it. But I also feel like it's out there and it doesn't seem like he's hiding it. And so the question then becomes if you create a culture where it's like you're expected to grind 90, 100 hours a week, maybe the promise is that you're going to work on something amazing. Does that feel like what you're talking about, where it's like, I know going in what it is. I know it's going to maybe take a toll on me, but I'm willing to have that toll because I want what's potentially at the end of that. Does that feel like it's a fairly transparent representation of, I'm still playing the hustle, crazy buy-in game, and I'm just inviting people to decide if they want to join it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for anything big, I'm not going to say anything like groundbreaking here. For anything big, you need people who are committed to that big thing and people who are
Yeah.
willing to recategorize or
Hmm.
stack rank their
Yeah.
priorities.
Hmm.
And look, a lot of people put their like I'm a rugby fan, and there are a lot of players who are like retiring because they want to spend more time with their family
Yeah.
because they're on the road 6 months. So it's like you just stack rank
Hmm.
what's important to you. For me, for example, I'm really grateful that I had a liquidity event before I got married because it
Hmm.
allowed me to like be all in with my family when I have a newborn and
Yeah.
whatever. But most people don't have that opportunity. Like I'm
Hmm.
I'm a privileged tech bro. Like
Yeah.
you know, so so I think that it is trade-offs. And I do think that innovation, and actually, I don't think this McKinsey says this in their latest report on remote work.
Hmm.
Innovation is much more likely to succeed when people are together.
Mm.
That is a part, and the other one the other piece that's important is safety. That can only really be felt in person.
Mm.
Um,
That's
but
interesting.
yeah, productivity doesn't go down or whatever. So yeah, I mean, if they're individual contributors and they're just like writing killer code and they're curing cancer or whatever they're doing, like they can be remote.
Yeah.
But if they're really trying to innovate, it's much better to be in person,
Mm.
which is why I've committed the next uh, phase of my professional life to retreat venues and bringing people together. Because if they're going to be remote, they might as well come be together for few days in a quarter.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting thing. I mean, I worked in advertising for most of my career, and um, COVID happened, and you know, it's interesting. I think my perspective might be a little different, but like I felt like we were still able to come up with interesting and cool new ideas even in a remote setting. It just had to be sort of operationalized differently, meaning you had to create moments of connection that were beyond the transaction, meaning getting together, being together in more organic moments, even if it's on a screen, at least where you're just talking and chatting and feeling some sense of connection versus every interaction is transaction based. What can you give me? What can I get from you? Because I think that feels like the underlying thing there. Like if suddenly everything is purely transaction based versus I walk around, I say hi, or I'm having a snack with somebody or drinking a coffee with somebody, the way I view my fellow employees changes, right? They flatten. I mean, they literally flatten on a screen, but they also, I think, flatten in terms of how we view them. So this idea of getting together once a quarter or whatever and doing these retreat things, I think is interesting because even the most diehard remote first people, I think will swear by something similar, which is the bonds are formed when we're actually literally in proximity to each other. So what do you see happening as you start to create these retreats and stuff? What do you think changes for somebody or some organization when they show up in person and spend 3 days a week, whatever the thing is? Like what can they expect from that?
Everything you just said gave me so many different vectors to jump off of.
Hmm.
But let me answer your question
Yeah.
uh, through these ideas.
Okay.
Um, at the beginning of the call, or the beginning of the pod, you said there is a larger crisis of belonging in the country,
Yeah.
and that's related to the flattening
Yeah.
of of
Mm.
personalities.
Yeah.
And the more, belonging is a fundamental human need. It's a
Hmm.
psychological, it's an independent construct in the field of psychology, and we all need it. So we don't get it, and we now don't get it from work.
Hmm.
Even things like the coffee or the snack that you talked about is a micro interaction, and micro interactions are one of the fuels to belong.
Got it.
So the flattening dehumanizes our
Hmm.
colleagues,
Yeah.
um, and dehumanizing our colleagues means that each of us finds less and less belonging
Hmm.
our through our interactions. When we first talked, TJ, you talked about how you take walks in your community,
Hmm.
and now you got like some buddies you do it with. I
Yeah.
mean, those are the things that you can now do because you're not in an office. So
Yeah.
there are trade-offs. You just needed to capitalize on those trade-offs. And I
Hmm.
think employers can actually capitalize on those trade-offs by
Mm.
helping people find belonging in their personal lives. Now, what do I mean
Yeah.
by that?
Mm.
I mean, first of all, giving them the space to do it
Yeah.
because they're not in the office to do it.
Hmm.
Secondly, I mean, things like helping people get loans for homes that
Hmm.
maybe negotiate a better loan with a bank or better terms with a bank, and they
Mm.
can help people move to the community they want to be in.
Yeah.
Maybe they can have these retreats that are offsites, and like you said, what's happening, and bringing back to your question, is that we still need that interaction, and we can kind of compress it into 2 or 3 days a quarter to
Okay.
really innovate. And I think innovation is different than creativity.
Hmm.
Research shows that a lot of creativity actually happens better individually when those ideas are brought to a group, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, hey, what about this, what about this?
Hmm.
Because then you actually have some group think. You probably have people
Hmm.
who are being terminally polite, so it's a
Yep.
little better to but anyway. So innovation is a little different because it requires exchanging of ideas and coming up with net new kind of
Mm.
leaps.
Yeah.
So I think retreats can help us do that. They can help us plan for the quarter, plan for the year, review the year. They can be a design sprint. It can be, a hackathon for an engineering team. It can be a
Hmm.
million things, but the benefits are much beyond what's achieved in those 3 days, and they
Yeah.
go much further into the relationship that deflattens our colleagues.
Yeah. I can imagine that. I mean, it's interesting you presented this different, at least to my ear, definition of innovation. I think it's one of those words that has lost almost all of its meaning in the culture because every company just says we want to be innovative or we want to innovate, and I think every person hears that a little differently. So I heard it as creativity, like bringing forth a new idea, and as what you're sort of saying is almost like it's a earlier process of like breaking things down and then like seeing what emerges. break
That's
it
right.
down, emerge, break it down, emerge. And like, okay, that does feel different. That feels a little more raw, a little more dependent on the sort of communal energy to do that versus I think
Yes.
as on our own or across screens, yeah, there's maybe less of that. I don't know what that energy is, but I can feel it. I know what you're talking about. Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah. It's a
something
one
there.
plus one equals three versus a one plus one equals like a 2.5.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then when you do that together, what I'm hearing is, in addition to the value of, hey, we came away with a bunch of thoughts for what we're going to do next quarter, it's also the process of being open and vulnerable with each other and sharing and celebrating and rewarding and maybe even busting on each other. I don't know, depending on how your culture is actually creating some glue that carries forward even when you're now working across screens. Is that right?
I think that's 100% right. Also working across screens does not allow for us to feel there's this so when I say safety, I mean specifically I can't feel safe if my manager is looking at me on a Zoom and they're like, "Oh, don't worry. We're not going to replace you with AI."
Mm.
I need to like feel that.
Hmm.
In Hebrew, we gotta sit with four eyes. There's obviously it's in English too, but we gotta be
Yeah.
together, four eyes. You know, um, so if you're telling me, oh, don't worry, we're not selling the company,
Hmm.
um, I might, it's hard for me to believe you.
Yeah.
Um, but then if I'm in the office and I don't see bankers walking in and out, then I believe you.
Mm. Okay.
So that's the safety that's going on, which you just can't replicate digitally.
Yeah.
Um, you also, no matter how good the tool is, you can't replicate a whiteboard and like a flip chart and a sticky note and like a
Hmm.
a shared, fidget toys. You can't do that. You can't be like eating corn nuts while like throwing ideas. It's
Yeah.
like not. It's
Mm.
it's just not a thing. Um,
Yeah, I'm gonna
so
try
I,
it. I'm gonna try eating corn nuts with somebody across the screen, see if we get some of that shared energy. But
Yeah,
I get it.
at least you won't hit them with like your,
Exactly. I'll be throwing them at the screen. Yeah, no, I think I get it. And I think, I really like that that idea of the banker, like noticing the bankers, right? There is something about being in a place, and I can think back to some specific examples in my career where like there is that palpable energy shift that you
hmm
can feel. And maybe some of it is because you just notice the way there are some new people showing up. It can even just be the body language of the CEO's body language is really different lately. They're
Yes.
walking faster, they're keeping their head down or whatever, or their door is closed like 7 out of 8 hours and
Right.
they used to have it open all the time. Like,
Right.
yeah, like there's really no replicable way to bring that to the virtual sphere. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I want to I want to rewind a little bit because I think we're touching on a lot of the at least beginnings of
And
ideas
by
of
the way, you also can't do experiences together. So we can't go rafting together,
yeah.
and like in Oculus or whatever. Like, I
Uh,
mean,
yeah, well,
we,
we could
you
try
know,
it, but we can also realize how sad and disappointing it is that we
exactly.
right we
Exactly.
try that. Yeah, and I want to come back to some of that stuff too. But before we do, I want to go back to some of the stuff you mentioned at the beginning because you talked about your own personal experience, and I think that's at the core of why this belonging project is so important to you. So you mentioned that you were adopted and you were an immigrant. So how did that show up for you as a kid in terms of noticing or feeling this sense of not belonging?
Well, it all started when I was uh, really in my biological mother's womb,
Yeah.
because I was adopted, and she made the decision to give me up before I was even born. So
Hmm.
imagine like kind of being like an occupier in a place that tells you to leave.
Mm,
Um and then I was given up for adoption when I was 5 days old. And then my dad abandoned my mom and I when I was two. And then
mm,
we immigrated when I was nine. So all these instances, I'm like, okay, well, I don't belong in with this family, and now I don't have a nuclear family to belong to. Again, eh, and then I have to immigrate to a place that I don't know and have to start negotiating identities.
Hmm.
So all of these traumas or life events really
Yeah.
cause the traumas really cause me to feel like I don't belong
Mm,
and chase it my whole life until I realize, well, that's been uh, this kind of itch that I've been trying to scratch.
mm. Yeah. No, I mean, I think your story feels like a edge case of what to some degree we all feel, but
Mhm.
you're feeling it at extreme levels, right? Because of boom, 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 all these things that helped you feel like, oh, I don't belong here. Oh, 2 years later, I don't belong here. 6, 7 years later, oh, I don't think I belong here. And then in your book, I think you even mentioned this sort of notion of like in America, you felt like an Israeli, and in Israel, you would feel like an American as you started to
Right.
to grow up in that. And I feel like we all have some degree of that, not to minimize your own experience,
No,
but
no, everybody's pain is at a maximum.
right, there is some, whatever the reasons, there are all these stories that we have that told us, oh, you don't belong here. I mean, kids, it's part of the sort of natural sorting of growing up is to tell
Mhm.
people they don't belong, right? Oh, you're not part of our crew because
Right.
kids are just sorting out who they are and then they're doing it through the lens of who others are. And it's like, I want people like me with me or whatever.
One of
Um,
the most offensive things you can say to somebody is you don't belong here.
yeah. And, and think about how often we probably hear that either literally those words or something
Hmm.
representing those words, particularly growing up, where
Hmm.
it's, you show up at the lunch table. No, scram, get away, kid. Like,
Hmm.
or you go to a party and nobody talks to you or whatever.
That's
Um,
right.
and then you're mirroring that and you're reliving that as an adult. But now we have enough agency to try to chase it, which is what I
Hmm.
hear you talking about. So you're
Which is why
saying,
belonging is both a feeling and an experience.
hmm, yeah. And so what are we aiming for with belonging? Is it experiences that generate the feeling, or how does that math kind of
Mhm.
work, or is it math?
Well, it's a positive feedback loop.
Okay.
So if you experience belonging, you feel belonging, and then you start to experience more because you're more open to it, and then you feel it more, and then you
Hmm.
start giving it to others. And I mean, at the core of belonging is hospitality,
Hmm.
is feeling welcome,
Yeah.
feeling warm, feeling like you can kick your feet up. You
Hmm.
know, that's That's at the core of it. And, as employers, by the way, have a certain responsibility to make that a reality for most people, unless they're
Yeah.
completely transactional.
Hmm.
By the way. And I think that, so the way I think about belonging, um, which is the only feeling that we have where we put a sense of in front of it, right?
Hmm.
That means we sense it. You touched it on earlier, this energy,
Hmm.
right? Like the body language, the facial expressions.
Hmm.
Um, um, it's a sense of belonging. It's not just
Yeah.
feeling belonging.
Hmm.
Um,
That's
and
wild.
in
Yeah.
order to measure that, I think about belonging as a our sense of belonging as a fuel tank,
Okay.
and the fuel tank takes different types of fuels, and each fuel gives us a little more belonging. Some give us more, some give us less. So,
Mm.
for example, my wife and daughter probably give me 40% of my belonging, maybe 50% of my belonging, maybe
Hmm.
even 60 actually.
Yeah.
Um, and for some people, it might be 90. For some
Yes.
people, it might be 10, you know,
Hmm.
for, so and then there are literally, I think I've list like 40 different activities somebody can find belonging through. And
Mm.
they're bucketed into two categories, traditional and non-traditional. Traditional is interpersonal relationships, casual encounters like the micro interactions we talked about,
Yeah.
or group membership,
Hmm.
which also includes events.
Yeah.
And then the non-traditional are symbolic bonds with people we may not know.
Hmm.
It's self-esteem, or even fictional characters. It's
Yeah.
self-esteem, driving luxury cars, wearing brand names, um, like even wearing like your favorite kind of like show on a t-shirt,
Yep.
and symbolic bonds, self-esteem, and contemplative practices.
Hmm.
So praying, meditation, stargazing,
Yeah. Hmm.
raising,
That's cool. I like how you're
and those are all
expanding.
the different activities, and each one's got like a bunch of, these are categories, and each one's got like a bunch of activities, and
Okay.
yeah, they all fill up your fuel tank, and any space you have that is not full. If you have any space in your tank, that's an opportunity for to find more belonging in your life.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the t-shirts. I'm wearing my Charlie Brown and Snoopy
Yeah,
t-shirt here, and that does give me a sense of belonging. I'm a big
there you
I'm a
go.
big
Yeah,
Snoopy guy. So
yeah, yeah.
it creates that for me. But I like how you're expanding the definition of I think how we think of belonging. Like the idea that an affinity for a fictional character or maybe it's somebody we're following on Instagram or something. And,
Right.
for me as a kid, it wasn't Instagram because it wasn't around them, but it was, you see my guitar back there. Eddie Van Halen was like, I felt a sense of belonging by sort of looking up to him
Yes,
and
that's right.
infusing that into some of my
And then
life. I
going to
want,
the concerts, and it just kind
yeah.
of it's this, and then meeting fans and going before
Mm-hmm.
the show, after the
Yeah.
show, tailgating, whatever.
Yeah.
It's that whole thing, and really good activities actually give you multiple paths
Mm.
to belong. So,
Yeah.
for example, if you're in a band that's like a Van Halen cover band, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a connection. It was Van Halen, you said, right?
Yep.
And then like you have a connection to Van Halen. Then maybe you go on a Facebook group and chat with other
Mm-hmm.
people. And then you go
Yeah.
to the concert. And then you have this collective effervescence which is kind of like being on the same wavelength as all the other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you play the music and it reminds you of the concert. It's just
Yeah.
like it's beautiful
Oh
to
yeah.
think about.
And as you explain all of that, I sit here and I go, okay, belonging at work. How much of some of what we're talking about here can actually be experienced in the workplace? And what you mentioned that leaders should be doing some things to encourage the belonging and setting that up. So what's realistic? What can we expect realistically from the workplace, and how does a leader start to build that?
Yeah. Killer question. So each one of the kind of main uh, paths, the kind of primary paths I discussed can apply to
Hmm.
work. So interpersonal relationships. The idea of a best friend of work has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
That is one path to belong. Even people who've met their spouses.
Yeah.
At social tables, we had four weddings out of the company.
Hmm.
So people found their life partner at
Yeah.
work,
Hmm.
or their best friend. Second is these casual encounters, micro interactions that we have. We
Hmm.
go, like on the way to work, we see the same barista, we
Hmm.
wave to the door person,
Yeah.
we kind of say hi to colleagues as we're walking in, fist bumping or whatever.
Hmm.
And then group membership, not just are you a member of this organization, but perhaps you're a member of some running club or an affinity group or employee resource group or whatever,
Hmm.
or an alumni group once you leave.
Yeah.
And so that's the traditional paths. And then the non-traditional path, symbolic bond. You have a symbolic bond with leadership, perhaps. You don't see them, but you feel connected to them through
Yeah.
AMA, through Q&A, through
Hmm.
town halls, through whatever. And
Hmm.
then the next one would be self-esteem. Maybe you get recognized as like, sales rep of the month, or you get, or you feel like you're proud to wear the logo, their hoodies outside, things like
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
Maybe you even have a name like Googlers,
Yeah.
for your employees. And
Hmm.
and the only one that's a little tough is contemplative practices. You don't,
Yeah.
that's more of an individual thing, but that's
Yeah.
really going in while all the other ones are going out.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that would be a little trickier and a little touchier in terms of the sort of third rail nature of some of
Yeah.
that stuff.
So I mean, look, some all hands are pretty spiritual, like our
They can
spiritual
be, yeah, a little
experience, but
culty even.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But
Yeah.
that's the one that I don't include.
Yeah, I get that. Well, one of the things that has been more prevalent in the workplace over the last handful of years is DEI, and sometimes it's DEI plus B, and the B is belonging. Um, and now there's sort of this pushback, so we're in this weird pendulum swing of where that is. But I think at a core, maybe the urge behind some of that is what you're talking about. But I'm curious to your experience, what What's different about how the way you're talking about this sense of belonging and the way it's shown up through the lens of DEI and maybe DEI plus B?
Well, first of all, I'm a big proponent of removing DEI.
Okay.
I don't think it has place at work. I think that it's great to have DEI metrics
Mm,
to improve on.
yeah.
And I think those metrics should be managed by HR.
Yeah.
I don't want HR shoving a belonging program down my throat. I
Mm,
want my leadership, the rest of the leadership team, or the managers to
mm,
care about belonging.
yeah.
So DEI is a function of a healthy corporate strategy,
Yeah.
while belonging is a feature of a healthy uh, corporate culture.
Mm. And how does, if, if I walk into a company and I look around and I go, well, this place is not hospitable. It's just not. But I like other things about it, and maybe their mission, is something that I'm aligned with. And so I want to be there. And I'm hired as a, see something or VP something. So I have a little bit of authority and power. What can I do to start to shift or help shift the leadership culture or the conversation around it so that we start to create a more hospitable place where people feel all the things we're talking about?
So the first question is, so you can follow John Cotter's like change management protocol, and
Mm-hmm.
it starts with like, or I think one of the first steps is like buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, let's assume that there is buy-in.
Yeah.
If there is buy-in, there are different things that leaders can do. So let's assume buy-in, and then let's just also assume signaling. So they're not walking around on their phone. They're making eye contact. They're following the 5 foot rule to say hi to anybody within a 5 foot circumference,
Mm.
or excuse me, diameter,
Yeah.
but 5 feet from them.
Yep.
And then, and then, they're maybe they're picking up a napkin on the floor. All those kind of little things that signal that
Mm.
they care about it.
Yeah.
Let's assume both those things. What they can do are very simple norm shifts. So, for example, um, in my last company, I didn't have a receptionist. We did have an office manager, but that person did not sit with a desk in front of the door. They sat around the corner
Got it.
because we made it the job of every single employee, no matter who they were and what their title was, to be a greeter. So
Mm.
anybody that it just so happened, people were, at 100 employees, there was always somebody there.
Yeah.
So anybody who saw a person, because it was right next to the kitchen, anybody who
Mm-hmm.
saw a person walk in, it was their job to greet them, offer them something to drink, tell them where to sit, and notify the person that they're there to see them.
Mm.
So that's a very like kind of simple but yet powerful norm change.
Yeah.
Another one is to think about events and gatherings as a way to promote a belonging culture.
Mm.
So not having drinking, for example, but having something that everybody can sign up for, but
Mm-hmm.
doesn't they don't have to participate. One of the mistakes I made as CEO is I was really militant
Mm.
about attendance and
Yeah.
as employees signaling if they're interested in the company or not. And that
Mm-hmm.
was there's some truth to that, but
Yeah.
there are just circumstances that prevent people from showing up to some things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's another one is really thinking about events and how they're designed as a tool for creating a culture of belonging and the ritualization of those things. So
Mm-hmm.
making sure it's quarterly, making sure it's annually, including employees in it. Um, and I really think, Stephen Covey says that people care about what they create.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that employees are part of whether it's like values 3.0 that you come up with, whether
Yeah.
it's an event committee for the things you're organizing,
Mm-hmm.
really making sure there's buy-in throughout the organization by
Yeah.
including different people in different ranks and roles.
Mm. That makes sense. Yeah. Um, I want to come back to your book. We touched on it a bit here, but your book is called The Quest: The Definitive Guide to Finding Belonging, and it's kind of got an interesting structure. So you designed it as kind of this climb up to the summit of a mountain. What What inspired that metaphor for the book?
So it's called the quest because initially it was going to be like a video game quest where you
Okay.
kind of go around. It was going to be this map, and you go around to like, you know, the like the jungle, and then you go to the desert, and then you go to like the North Pole, and like you're finding belonging throughout that the
Got it.
quest. Maybe some side quests on the way.
Hmm.
Listen, the analogy got a little too out of control, and I was like, this is ridiculous.
Okay.
And then I was like, well, it is a climb because the first stage is understanding um, your how you find belonging right now. The second
Hmm.
stage is kind of like identifying what your belonging persona is because each person is different.
Hmm.
The third stage is kind of making sure that your belonging tank aligns to your persona. And then the fourth stage is really kind of like scanning your environment and developing some skills to become better at belonging.
Mm.
So the reason why I structured it that way is because each is built on another. But unlike most climbs, when you start descending, you kind of stay at the top. And you can see from the view from the top, you can kind of start seeing patterns, mistakes, opportunities, and so forth. But
Okay.
just like any climb, you're going to make a wrong turn. You might have to do a switchback. And that's what I call kind of these false belonging summits, where you
Mm.
kind of think you get there, but like, you're not. Like, that's actually a hand-me-down belonging you got from your parents or something.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why I structured it that way.
Mm.
Bit of a cheesy like analogy, but I thought it worked well for what I'm doing.
I think it works. I mean, what I also enjoyed about the way you did it. I mean, you talk about these kind of personas, and I think that's an interesting idea. So, tell me more about that. What are the belonging personas, and how did you sort of figure out those?
Yeah, so let me start with the second part. The way I figured it out is I took this empirical approach where, by the way, my book has 120 plus citations. It's not just like my intuition
Yeah.
guiding you,
Yeah.
because it would probably misguide you. And
Hmm.
although it's not true, like I guess my intuition led me to writing the book, but
Yeah.
um, it's just my imposter syndrome is alive and real, and I felt like I needed to cite my work.
Hmm.
So I found this uh, statistically independent measure of belonging called the need to belong scale. And the need to
Hmm.
belong scale is a 5-point scale where anything below 2.5 is a low need to belong, and anything above 2.5 is a high need to belong. And we all have a different, score on that scale.
Mm.
And I took that, I put it on an x-axis with on the
Okay.
right side, high need to belong, and on the left side, sorry, I put it on the y-axis, bottom, low need to belong, top, high need to belong. And I
Okay.
was like, well, what else does belonging actually need? It needs your attachment style, whether you're
Mm.
secure or insecure in the attachment style. So secure is
Okay.
on the right, insecure is on the left. And then I was like, okay, great. I have 4 quadrants. I'm a A+ management consultant. I got I got a 2x2.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I mean, I love 2x2s because it's a really easy way to break an idea down.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, top right, secure attachment, high need to belong. What animal is that? Oh yeah, that's a chimpanzee. They're
Mm.
hanging out in the trees, picking each other's lice, playing, flirting, fighting,
Hmm.
just hanging out as a team. So I call that eager belongers.
Okay.
There are then anxious belongers, which are meerkats, because they are sticking their head up, looking at their buddies, looking for threats, going back to their system of tunnels to have a party.
Yeah.
So those are the anxious belongers, the meerkats. There
Mm-hmm.
are the reluctant belongers, which are the snow leopards. They basically walk around in solitude. They find a mate. They maybe raise a family, but then everybody does their own thing.
Hmm.
And then finally, there are independent belongers, which are wolves. And wolves basically can be part of a pack or can be a part alone. And that's why they have a low need to belong, but a secure attachment style.
Mm.
And that is, they can basically, I call that the best one because
Yeah. They
anything
can
they
do
do.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I kind of got jealous of the wolves there for a second,
Oh yeah.
actually. I was like, I want to be a wolf, but I don't think I am a wolf. I think on a good day, I might be a chimp, and on a less good day, it might be a meerkat.
Yeah, yeah. I'm 100% meerkat. I'm always worried about what people think, always trying to
Yeah.
fit in, kind of like, but that being said, I also need a ton of belonging strategies. Like my
Hmm.
tank has like the average tank has like 7 point something activities. The
Yeah.
lowest is 2, the highest is 17. The range is, 2 to 17, and
Hmm.
mine is like 20. I I
I
have
like it.
so many ways of find belonging, and
Uh,
that's okay. But
yeah.
I do urge people to edit their tank and kind of manage it. And um, like for example, I'm in a 12-step recovery program, and like I find a ton of belonging there. It
Hmm.
boosts my self-esteem because I can talk about it.
Yeah.
It gives me group membership because of the fellowship of the program. It
Hmm.
gives me a higher power, so contemplative
Hmm.
practices. So
Yeah.
there's many reasons. So that was added, but that's a sacrifice. So I'm adding that. I got to remove other things, unless I
Hmm.
have that opportunity I talked about. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a big fan of editing it and developing skills to enhance it, and always thinking about your environment in order to maximize your opportunity, because some people may be living in the wrong place. Some people may have the
Yeah.
wrong job. Some
Hmm.
people don't have the education they need. Some people
Hmm.
need to raise their consciousness level. There are 9 different environmental factors in deciding your sense of belonging.
Mm. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, my first instinct is like, well, I want to sort of actually figure out where I fit on those quadrants. And then what I imagine then is that the sort of belonging tools or what I don't remember what you called them exactly, but the
Activity strategies. Yeah.
activities, like depending on where you fall, certain activities might be more suited to you.
I give you a chart. So
Okay.
basically, I tell you what to do based on your persona.
Okay. And then, as you mentioned that, like, you know, I started to wonder, like you mentioned, like you might be in the wrong job, and that got me like thinking, like I don't know that at least with our own knowledge of it, we're seeking out jobs based on belonging, but probably underneath that may be driving us, like, oh, I want to do this because there's just an urge to do it, and in the context of belong work should not be a source of belonging but a platform. How does that sort of play? Like if I look at my sort of persona and then I think about that in the lens of work, how do I appropriately sort of say what can I do on the belonging sphere at work that serves my style, without sort of leaning so far in that I'm basically trying to like hold on to work as my sort of solution to my
Mhm.
persona, you know?
So the first thing is that I think about like people who say, how many times have you seen like somebody described as like former SpaceX employee or
Mm,
former Google employee?
yeah.
People have just that self-esteem boost when they introduce themselves in a certain way.
Yep.
So that's one way, obviously, through self-esteem, that even working or having worked somewhere, people find their sense, get their sense of belonging strengthened. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but approaching it from a platform perspective, I think that it's really important to have people, first of all, assuming that they have the personality that wants belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may have it outside of the work, they don't even care.
Yeah.
So assuming that they do care and that they have availability
Yeah.
in their tank, then uh, they can go ahead and make an effort to meet people, develop relationships, join the different groups. But not, most people, I'd have to say, most people don't want that.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
but if they do, then they can understand it's a platform, and I can actually get these needs met through the workplace. It's just like a lubricant. It just helps me find it. Like
Mm-hmm.
literally, it's a crossroad moment, right? Like the way I think
Yeah.
about it is we move, every time every time we change jobs, every time our kids start a different kind of school,
Yeah.
we have a crossroad moment to, to double our network, to experience something new, to whatever.
Yeah.
And the number of crossroads moment we have in our life just diminish over time. So
Mm.
every time you change a job, that's another crossroad moment.
Yeah.
So applying what you've learned in the past, maybe you didn't really try to make friends. Maybe you didn't really go. So if you want them, some people don't want it, but you
Yeah.
have to want it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I definitely know that there's distinct personalities around that. I always liked it. I always thrived when I felt like I could connect and make friends at work.
Sure.
I also bounced around a lot, so I'm curious what the psychology is there in terms of was I chasing belonging? by hopping to different jobs. I don't know, but I imagine others might have a similar story where it's like something's not being met, and so you're trying to create more of those moments that I think they're so baked into growing up, right? We're constantly changing grades. New people come in. We go from elementary to middle school to high school to college, from college into the workplace. So like we're trained that way, and it's almost like I wonder for some of us, it's like you can't get off that machine, and so you just keep generating those moments for yourself in the hopes that it creates that thing. But that doesn't feel like probably the healthiest thing to do in that context. Like there's probably a better way to step back. And maybe this is part of your process where it's stepping back and being really honest about what our belonging needs are, and then being really curious about where we get those, and maybe not always presuming that they need to come from work.
That's right.
And where else can we get them? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I
Mm.
mean, like the Stoics said, I mean, the basics of the Stoics was know thyself.
Yeah.
And that's why early on in the quest, you have to figure out your belonging persona. And
Mm-hmm.
again, like some people may have a full tank. They might be a chimp, but they might have a full tank. So they're not looking to make buddies at work,
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
But there are a few kind of dependencies
Mm-hmm.
in order to really leverage work for belonging. Um,
Yeah.
and again, it's assuming that you want it, assuming they have the room, and assuming that you're not looking for it elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I do think that look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that when there is a culture of belonging, there are positives. There is higher engagement, there's more commitment,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so on and so forth. So there's increased productivity. Organizational commitment is huge.
Yeah.
Um, so there are only benefits to belonging.
Mm. Yeah. I want to touch on the slight outlier in this. We talked about the sort of contemplative practice, and that can lean into things like spirituality or meditation. And that one, like, is the least obvious to me when you talk about all the different ways we can belong. Um, so what is important about that, and what I guess is the recipe there? Meaning, what do we find through that practice, whatever we find there, whatever we choose, that gets us to a place of feeling belonging in that sphere?
So all of the writing on belonging up until my book really was about, the consumer writing, I should say, was all
Mm-hmm.
about, go do an ayahuasca journey, go, run around naked in the forest, go talk to God, go eat, drink, pray, eat, love, pray.
Yep.
Uh, Brene Brown is huge on this topic, but she really doesn't give you a prescription other than like being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all her intuition, Elizabeth Gilbert's intuition, Eckhart Tolle's intuition. All of those are spot on.
Mm-hmm.
But people like me are like, what the fuck are you talking about? So the I don't work that way.
Yeah.
You know, I can't just like, okay, close my eyes, okay, and listen. I'm thinking about a million things.
Mm-hmm.
So for many of us who don't have the biochemistry to do that,
Yeah.
then we need to find our own, which is why I love the 12-step program. It's like we came to understand a higher power as we came to accept a higher power as we understood him.
Mm.
As we understood, and that can mean anything. So, like, we can talk about religion, sure. For me, I rediscovered Judaism once I moved to Boise, Idaho, because I was like, wow, there's no Jews here. I gotta like lean in.
Mm-hmm.
I got a family. We want to have a shared system, So, um, but that's not it. You can stare at the stars and realize, holy shit, I am just a dot.
Yeah.
Or like, wow, there's interconnectedness. You can learn about plants and how plants communicated through psilocybin networks, which is like the
Mm.
original information superhighway
Mm.
underground. The
Yeah.
interconnectivity of all this stuff can give you a sense of belonging, realizing you're part of a bigger
Mm.
picture, or part of a
Yeah.
bigger plan, or part of an interconnected universe. That's what I mean when I talk about
Yeah.
contemplative practices. The things that make you step to the side for a second and
Mm.
realize, wow, I'm part of this incredible blank.
Mm.
And and it's like knowing your place in the network, really.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in some ways, um, that doesn't like jibe with the way we're living in so many ways. This life through screens, this and not just Zoom at work, but I mean, from social media to everything, and the flattening of existence in many ways. Like it feels almost opposite of stepping into wonder and stepping into um, that sense of connectedness, right? The more we flatten, the more everyone just appears as like some 2D avatar for like you know something that's wrong almost, right? Like you become the source of my pain, or the thing I want to overcome, or the thing I want to shout down, or the thing I want to ignore, as opposed to what you're describing, whether that's looking at the stars or connecting to your faith, or for those who can meditate, doing that, for those who enjoy the communal space within a church or something like that,
Bingo, exactly.
singing together. I mean, that's like one of those beautiful moments of like, holy crap, we're connected.
Mhm.
Is opposite of that to me, and I wonder like, how do we, in a world that feels like it's flattening in so many ways, how do we continue to open ourselves up to the unflattening of that, and realizing that there is this beautiful interconnectivity?
Great question. I just want to correct myself that I said psilocybin networks. I meant to say mycelium networks. So
Ah,
I want to fix
okay.
that.
Yeah, I
Um,
was curious about that. I'm like, is
yeah,
that, it's like that mushrooms or something on your
yeah, it
brain?
is mushroom. Well, mycelium is fungi, but it's much
Got
more.
it.
Anyway, um, the answer to the question of what do we do in the world we live in
Mm-hmm.
is to understand belonging. The quest for belonging is a personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to us to take that journey. We
Yeah.
can't wait for an employer to help us do it. We can't wait for a president to tell us how to do it. A JFK moment of ask not is not going to be is doesn't really inspire
Mm.
us as much as it used to.
Yeah.
A corporation, a government can't really solve it. It's not top down, it's
Mm.
bottom up.
Yeah.
And the Surgeon General, who has warned us about this, I mean, sure, okay, loneliness is a problem, but I
Mm-hmm.
always say if loneliness is a problem, belonging is the solution.
Yeah.
And, Vivek Murthy, who did a lot of great work on loneliness, the loneliness epidemic, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, all he said is like, go and get involved with your community, go find a friend.
Yeah.
That is not
Mm.
actionable
Yeah.
in most people.
Agreed.
So in my book, I say, here's how you find friends.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how you create a community.
Yeah.
Here is what you need to do, not
Yeah.
what everybody else needs to do. Here's what
Mm.
you need.
Yeah. I think that's a really critical distinction, because on the surface, people might think, oh, those are similar things. Go find a community, and here are some ways to go find a community. But that is the wall, right? I mean, when I hear go find a community, all I do is go, I have no idea how to do that. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, okay, maybe I could go to coffee shop and, like hopefully say hello to somebody, or what, like, or join something, but I don't really know what that means. And the same thing of like, go, you know, make some friends or make some connections. I'm like, if I knew how to do it, probably would be doing it already, right? But the fact is, and this is, I think, the challenge for a lot of folks, particularly as we get older, it's like, I don't know exactly how to do some of those things, because, you spend the first 25 ish years of your life at least having it thrust upon you. And there's all kinds of challenges with that too. But,
Yeah.
and then you spend the next 50 plus years of your life thinking there's something wrong with you because you no longer have it thrust upon you, but you actually don't know how to like seek out friends or community because it's no longer just laid on top of you. So I think
Yeah,
the
I
idea,
can I can share
yeah.
very directly. So you're absolutely right. So first of all, let's look at the research. The longitudinal study on people's happiness reveals that the number one thing, according to Professor Waldinger in his latest book from Harvard,
Mm-hmm.
is at least one friend. That
Yeah.
helps out longevity. That helps. So we're not talking about go meet a million people. We just
Right.
need one. Okay, so
Hmm.
let's kind of lower the bar a little bit, you
Yeah.
know, and then let's look at what we can do. Well, I think one really great path is for so you know how many people you ask them what are your hobbies and they don't have an answer.
Yeah.
You know how many? What are your interests? I don't know, like Instagram.
Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like what do you do in your spare time? Oh, I don't know, like walk my dog.
Yeah.
By the way, pets are of self-esteem
Hmm.
generating, and therefore they're a path to belonging.
I can get that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But so okay, well, so the next is an interest, and that's one of the critical skills to what I call belonging intelligence is actually interest exploration.
Mm.
And I have a process for how to do that. It's fine. And it's about connecting all the things you're into like a actual interest. So so interest exploration. Another one actually is what I refer to as social cultivation, and that's kind of reviewing who you've been close to,
Mm.
and then creating the system that works for you to like check in, ping, like, and then kind of re-engage people in your
Hmm.
there's a reason why you guys were homies. It's
Yeah.
like, let's kind of let and life happened, right? But
Yeah.
like, so it's kind of like sometimes the answers are in the past.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Another one is for community, for example, is like starting a text thread for a couple of people that you know around a very specific topic, like I don't know, like Trump memes or whatever.
Right.
Well, that there's a term for that. It's called uh I forget. It's like pebbling. That's what it is, pebbling, because
Okay.
it's what penguins do when they give little pebbles to each other. So it's like, oh, here's a little pebble. So um so starting that and then moving that towards maybe in person. Like the other day, um I am I'm a huge fan of this show called Kill Tony.
Hmm.
And I got a couple of my friends who like Kill Tony, didn't know each other on a
Yeah.
text thread. We share clips, we share observations. And just the other day, we had like a virtual watch party of his Netflix debut.
Mm.
And then we went to freaking Nashville to see him live.
That's cool.
So, like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like it starts with a step.
Hmm.
Best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
Yeah.
So I talk about these strategies, which people
Mm.
don't really like consider.
Yeah.
Um, and the other one is actually cultivating your risk for rejection.
Mm. Yeah.
Because that is the biggest blocker for many people. So
Hmm.
how do you manage rejection? Not just when people tell you you don't belong here, but telling people, you know what, this is not for me.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
rejecting both ways.
Mm.
Like how many people are stuck where they are because they just are afraid to say no, to reject that thing from their life.
Yeah.
So you don't have to say like, "Hey, f you, friend. I don't no longer like you." You just have to talk to them less, be less
Hmm.
available, and it'll
Yeah.
fizz out as you add more things.
Yeah.
So those are some pieces of advice I get. Very practical, super practical advice.
Mm.
Not like
Yeah.
some not some like abstract whatever.
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, something as simple as a group text thread is like very doable, right? And
Yeah.
even the idea of like, how do I reconnect with that buddy of mine that we haven't talked in a while? Like, oh, maybe it's just like an occasional, like every month or so, I send a text and go, "What's going on, dude?" Whatever it
Yeah.
is.
I
Yeah.
mean, even co-hosting something. A lot of people don't want to host because they don't want the burden.
Yeah.
But then co-hosting with somebody something, not even in somebody's house. It
Yeah.
can be anywhere. You don't have
Right.
to be drinking. I mean, just co-hosting is another really big thing because it
Mm.
doesn't make you take this like big leap of all this responsibility on your own, and
Yeah.
then more than one person are responsible for who's coming.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah, I think the beauty of what you're talking about, in addition to being super relevant, we talked about the crisis of belonging, the loneliness crisis, and how I don't know. I think everybody's feeling this. I don't think like everybody I know I think has some issue around like feeling a sense of being disconnected, not feeling like we're belonging, and there's so much talk about it. Like you mentioned, there's lots of big names out there recognizing the problem and maybe offering up sort of broad stroke ideas of, like being vulnerable or whatever. Like none of those things sound wrong to me, but it's like you're lowering it to this level of like more of almost an instruction manual.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, go to Bali, Italy, and India. Like, hello, I don't have the budget for that. Like,
yeah,
oh, well, and I'll just like, on a wish and a prayer. Like,
yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't.
No, I know. And the yeah, like those kind of like year-long journeys of finding yourself, which like
Yeah,
again, it makes a wonderful book or a
what beautiful,
story,
beautiful.
but
Yeah,
yeah, as a model for what I can do in my life, it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I can do that, but I could probably start a text thread. I think I can handle that, or maybe even
right.
co-host a thing down in Applebee's with a couple
Yeah,
buddies, and like,
exactly.
you know, so I love that that's what you're doing, and I think it's important in all spheres of life. I think we've talked about how it can obviously connect at work, and I think there's something really wonderful about making your expectations around what work can do in that sphere sort of more realistic, but also more serving your whole life and
That's
not
right.
putting all of your eggs in that basket. So we've talked about a lot of things, and I've asked you a fair amount of questions. I'd love to see if you have a question that we can put out to our audience around some of this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the number one kind of, I've said all of my like catchphrases. I think for
Mm-hmm.
me, the number one thing is adopting a belonging mindset and simply just asking, very casually, kind of exploring the question is, does blank give me belonging?
Mm,
In the book, I have the 5 C's of like actually figuring out if it's belonging. It's like, I forget what they all are, but it's like, are you committed to it? Are you charged? Like, does it give you
mm-hmm.
energy?
Yeah,
Um, like, I forget what the C is, but do you proselytize it? Like, do you share it?
yeah,
There's 5 things you need to say yes to if they give you a sense of belonging.
mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's just your gut.
Yeah,
Like, do I feel belonging here? And what is belonging? Can I be myself? Do I feel seen? Do I feel valued?
mm-hmm.
Am I contributing?
Yeah,
Am I being recognized for the contributions I'm giving? Um, so it's reciprocal.
mm,
That's really what I urge people is to think about, does that give me belonging? Is that give me belonging? Oh no, let me
mm,
do it less. Oh yeah, let me do it more.
yeah,
And that's really it. That belonging mindset's my number one piece of advice. And
yeah,
you know something again, you don't have to read my book. You can just know this. It's your sense, it's your sixth sense. You
right.
have it. And if
Mm,
anybody's interested, they can go to belongingquest.com and take the quiz, find out their persona, and I tell you literally what to do for free. Like you don't
mm.
have to read my book. It's like the TLDR is right there.
I like that. I think people should read your book because it's a really good
Thank
book.
you.
But I do think
Thank
like
you.
having some of those free tools and the idea that some of this stuff is like we know it. Like, I can think of a handful of things I do in my life that I'm already kind of going through. Like, does that give me belonging? Not really. And on some level, like certain things, like does that give me belonging? Not really, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
Meant to. I don't need it to. Like you mentioned, like work or whatever. Like I don't need work to give me belonging. Fine, as long as I know
right.
that.
Right.
But is my
Your
belonging
podcast
tank?
gives you belonging.
It does,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You have a
yeah,
community. They don't necessarily know you in person. They know your personality.
yeah,
They give you feedback.
yep, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, kind of building off of what you just said, I'm curious, like in the world of work, if you could wave a magic wand and create a fully desuckified workspace or work world, what does that look like to you?
So I just want to be very clear. We're talking about today, not in the
Yeah.
future and not in the past.
Okay.
I think we're returning to the transactionality of work.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to just go back to work is work. And it's like, obviously there's the kind of the three standard deviations removed from the mean where it's like the SpaceX or like the, I don't know, big like
Yeah.
biotech or something. But for most people, work is work. You know, I got news for you. My mom used to say, I hate to say it, my mom used to say it all the time. The graveyard is full of people who are replaceable.
Yeah. That is
So,
fair.
but like, okay, you're doing awesome stuff. Great. What would happen if you treated work a little more transactionally? You did a
Mm.
bang up job. You were productive as fuck, but then you just exhaled.
Mm.
Um, and you then, because you were doing a great job and you're productive and whatnot, you can exhale without the guilt, and you can make space for other things.
Yeah.
Um, so
Mm.
that would be my ideal. And it would be, the way I think about it, and this is not necessarily original thought by me, but really you need to think about work in three spheres. I kind of put this model together, but it's built off of the organizational fairness work that's coming out. But it's really three spheres. There is a meritocracy, like, we know what that means. There is DEI. We talked about the metrics and their importance. And then there is what's this perception of fairness. What's fair?
Yeah.
Which is kind of in between DEI and
Yeah.
and meritocracy.
Yeah.
It's these three things, which are the spectrum. And the middle in that Venn diagram is belonging culture.
Yeah.
So that's how I want people to think about it. That would be my.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that really helps crystallize it as you described that there. And I think that sort of visual of somebody being able to exhale after work without guilt. I do a lot of work now as an executive coach, and I think that might be one of the hardest things. The most common things that people struggle with is they're dying to exhale, but they can't because there's so much guilt underneath that exhalation that you just go, all right, I guess I can't exhale. I guess I'm just going to stay on this ride for another 10 years. And so I appreciate that visual, but I also appreciate that there are some practical ways to allow yourself to exhale without guilt, which are the expanding belonging into all spheres of our life so that we're not clinging to it so tightly in the workspace. That feels critical to me.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So one of the things that helps create belonging on this show is I have everybody do a silly sound effect at the end of the show, and it'll show up somewhere in your intro. So what do we got, Don?
We're going to do the sound of an elephant.
All right.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah. No, I kind of want to see it with the full.
Okay.
Perfect. That was awesome. I love it. That will definitely show up somewhere in the beginning of the show, and of course, it'll be here in the episode.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I love that. It kind of reminds me. I feel like when I was growing up, I feel like my dad maybe did that once in a while as kind of like a playful.
I thought it was original. I thought it was. All right. I gotta go back
original,
to the lab,
man. Nothing is original.
Just repackaged.
Exactly. So I appreciate you doing that. And the last question I always ask is, how can people find you online? How can people track down your book and learn more about what you're doing?
So the best way to find me is my name is spelled Dan, pronounced Don. So Dan J like in Joseph, Berger, BERGER.com. It's got all the stuff I'm working on. So just go there.
Awesome.
And then Dan Berger on Dan Berger on every social.
Okay, awesome. Well, I will put that in the show notes so people can find you and start figuring out how we can all belong a little more and enjoy life a little more. I remember that joy was kind of one of the themes in your book as well.
Right.
A little more joy in life.
Well, that's how you get it. I mean, belonging leads to joy, and joy is a state and not just a mood like happiness.
Yeah. I love that. Awesome. Well, Don, thank you so much for coming on. This was a really fun discussion, and it's got a lot of stuff spinning in my head, so I'm excited to kind of dig in and explore my own sense of belonging.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, TJ. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Don for bringing deep insight and practical strategies to the show. You can follow Don on LinkedIn and check out his site, belongingquest.com, where you'll find his belonging quiz, info on his book, and a ton of other helpful goodies. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to dive deep into some of your own challenges at work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session where we can explore new desuckified possibilities for your future. Bye, everyone.